On the 11th of November, 1880, John Castillo, the governor of the jail, informed his prisoner that the hour of execution had been fixed at 10 a.m. His leg irons were removed, and at 9 a.m. he was led out, accompanied by the chaplain. When passing the jail's garden, he commented on the beauty of the flowers. Accounts differ about the true last words of this prisoner, some suggesting that he said nothing but an inaudible mumble. The Argus newspaper stated that he said, "Ah, well, I suppose it has come to this," as the rope was placed around his neck. But the most widely quoted last words of this prisoner before he was hanged are, "Such is life." This is the last day of the short but eventful life of one of Australia's last but definitely the most famous bushranger, Edward Ned Kelly.
It's your boy, Neddy.
It's your boy, Neddy. And I must admit, when writing this, I have frequently written him down as our boy Ned.
Our boy
or
Ned.
Old Ned.
Old Neddy.
Of course, he was 26, so he was not. He was by no means
younger
old.
than us.
He was younger than we are now, and significantly more famous.
So, welcome back to Cheeky Tales. You will notice that while I am here, I being Aaron, and I realize that now more than a year into our podcast, I've never actually said my own name.
You haven't, have you?
No.
Interesting.
You will notice that the other voice is not John.
No, it's Sean.
It's Sean.
Yeah, back many months later after Sean Vember, which was a big success.
Sean Vember was a big success, and I'm not salty that you've got more listens than me. But John is sadly down with the sickness.
Ooh.
And it is a sickness that doth not allow him to be near us.
No, it's probably best not, noting that it's just not worth it.
Yeah, it is not COVID, but we wish John a speedy recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And it is sad to not have him here for his first missed episode of his own podcast.
It is, yeah. If only it were easier to phone him in.
Yeah, I have thought sometimes that it would be nice to have equipment that I could just leave somewhere.
Yes.
But, you know.
Well, I mean, we talked about that for a while for if I could phone in from or reel in from Townsville when it was necessary, but now I don't have to.
Yeah, maybe I'll look into that.
Yeah.
So that John can, well, not be here this week, but you know, maybe next time someone else can use it.
So our regular listeners will of course know that I was obviously living in Townsville.
Yes.
And Sean Vember was special because I was down for enough time that we could record 2 episodes.
Yes.
But now I'm here.
And that 2 episodes definitely wasn't 2 nights, one back to back.
It definitely wasn't 2 nights, one back to back where I wrote the script in one day. But no.
Sean has moved to our town. He now is a Brisbaneite.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's able to join us more frequently.
It's great.
Even though he's been here 2 months and this is the first time he's come.
Ah, well, you had enough great tales.
We did have tales. But it is nice to have you sub in for John this week and make your third appearance, second tale.
Second tale.
And it's a good one.
It is.
It's our boy Neddy.
It is. And it was difficult to write.
I would say every Australian knows Ned Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
Not many Australians know the Ned Kelly story.
Correct. And that's kind of the motivation for this. I have been to regional Victoria a lot in my life, particularly through my young adult years and a little bit in high school. And I was honestly quite fascinated with the amount of sort of history that it's in that region altogether. Like I've been through Seymour, Wangaratta, Beechworth, been to Glenrowan twice, which I will talk about.
These are all places.
They're all places. They're all places north of Melbourne, which for people that haven't been to Victoria, there is stuff in Victoria that isn't Melbourne or Phillip Island.
Or Bendigo.
Or Bendigo, yeah. or Ballarat's the other big one as well. Yeah. So there's a lot of towns that are sort of about an hour to 2 hours away from each other that, started out as important homesteads and then continued to be towns.
Yeah. And there's gold rush stuff down there as well.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of gold history because of so much waterways and mountains. Yeah.
Well, do you want to get stuck in?
Yeah, I do. So
I'm trying to think of a pun.
I don't really think there's going to be a lot of puns for this one, except maybe some tin can jokes. But they're
put on your homemade armor, and I'll shoot. No, I'll put on my homemade armor, and you shoot the story at me.
Oh, that's not great. Because that just sounds like shoot your shot, and I'm not okay with that.
All right, well, shoot your shot then.
Yeah,
That was a bad
Anyway.
one. I'm not proud of that, but
No.
you know what? It's out there and you
It's
can
out
all
there.
suck it.
It's
It's my podcast and I'll say what I want.
it's my podcast. I'll say what I want. Okay, so John Red Kelly was
That's
born
funny.
in. I know
That's topical.
it's topical. John Red Kelly was born in 1820 in Clonbrogan of Tipperary County, Ireland.
Okay.
At the age of 21, he was found guilty of stealing 2 pigs and was transported on the Prince Regent. Yeah, just 2 pigs. That's it.
I love convict era Australia.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, you did some small crime, forever banished.
Yep, off you go.
Off to the colonies.
Off you go, off to the colonies. Yeah, so he was transported to Australia on a ship called the Prince Regent to Hobart
Yep.
in the at the time named Van Diemen's Land.
I hate the fact that they changed it. Can I say that?
Yeah, that's fair. I
Van
mean,
Diemen's Land is so much better.
it is a great name.
Yeah.
I haven't actually looked into why they changed it to Tasmania. I feel like
Abel Tasman.
it's just named after Abel Tasman.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
That's pretty much it.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. Well, fair enough. Anyway, so he was transported to Hobart just for stealing 2 pigs to, in Van Diemen's Land, which is, of course, now on the continent of Antarctica.
Yep.
I'm kidding. It's at the bottom of Australia, of course. He arrived on the 2nd of January, 1842. After serving his sentence, he was released in January of 1948 and moved over the Bass Strait.
Wow. They moved him to the other side of the country. I mean, the other side of the planet.
Yeah. So they
For, what, 4 years? Was it 42 to 48?
42 to 48.
So
Yeah.
6 years.
6 years. So he moved over. It's not the Bass Strait. Don't know why I called it that. He moved over to the mainland to Victoria, where he found employment
That
as
is the Bass Strait.
It is the Bass Strait. I don't know why my brain just broke for a second. I was going to say over the pond, but that's a New Zealand reference.
Yes.
Which, of course, is a deep reference to a joke, of course, that I once convinced you that Ned Kelly was from New Zealand.
I don't recall that, but that does seem like the kind of thing that you would try and convince me.
That was the first successful one.
Okay.
I didn't have as much luck with my other jokes.
No.
High school was tough. Anyway, so he moved over to Victoria and he found employment as a bush carpenter on a farm in Wallen. What's
Okay.
a bush carpenter compared to a normal carpenter?
Yeah. What's the distinction? Is it just that he's in the bush?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
So this is a period in Victoria where a lot of it is, it's genuine settler life.
Yeah.
The land is unexplored, it's uncleared, it's unfarmed, it's
Yeah, they're just going out there and doing what they need to.
yeah, it's bush. It's the outback that isn't.
They're bush settling.
Yeah. So he found employment as a bush carpenter. 2 years later, Red married his boss's 18-year-old daughter, Ellen Quinn, at St. Francis Church. They then left the farm to pursue a gold digging career and found just enough success to purchase a small amount of land in Beveridge, which is just north of Melbourne. They built a small home in 1859 and set about starting a family. And at this point, our main protagonist is born. Edward Ned Kelly, the third child of 10.
That seems common for that
The
era.
third child of 10. That's just to Ned's dad, too,
Yeah.
not including his future stepdad. In December 1854.
Okay.
I say December
it did
18.
only just occur to me that this wasn't Ned.
It just,
I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that about Ned Kelly.
This is
Oh,
Red.
really? I only lived here for a few years. That's weird.
This is Red Kelly. So Red Kelly married Ellen Quinn.
Yep.
They bought a home. Well, they went gold digging, bought a home, and now they're having some children.
Yep.
So the third child of 10, Edward Ned Kelly.
10 is a lot of kids.
I know it's a lot,
Yeah.
especially in the size of the house that they had.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Wow.
We can provide picture for the socials. It's
I would
pretty good.
like that.
Yeah. So he was born in December 1854. What day? Not sure.
Cool. That's pretty common for that era too.
Yeah,
where they're
not-
just like, May.
It's thought to be about December.
Yep.
And it could have been earlier. It could have been, but they just know it was 1854. So sometime around December.
So I could share a birthday with Ned Kelly.
Mm-hmm. You
I'm
very
gonna
well
claim that.
could, yeah. He was then baptized, potentially, by the same priest that will give him his last rites in the jail many years
Ooh.
later. Ooh, yeah. There's a lot of overlap.
It seems like there's a lot of mystique here.
There is, and there's a little bit of overlap because there just isn't that many people
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a little bit foreboding, but not exactly.
I guess, yeah, that's the thing is that like back then it was possible that you would have 50 people that you ever met. And
Yeah.
that's crazy to think.
It's crazy to think about. And
Yeah.
it's even crazy to think that simply the size of the clergy would have been not very big.
Yeah.
One priest, possibly per town, maybe even just region.
Yeah.
Yeah. So issues in the area that surrounding members of Ned's family created a bit of a problem for the family, with Ned ending up on the stand to give evidence in favor of his uncle, who was convicted of stealing cattle.
Nice.
Red began to develop a drinking problem soon after this, and the family soon moved to a town called Avenel in 1864, which is near Seymour. That's pretty much the middle of Victoria.
Okay.
Seymour is a small, kind of rough-ish town, most famous these days for having the Puckapunyal Army Base.
That explains it.
Yeah, and it's also on the main train line going north, which would then... It's the main train line going north, and then it turns towards Sydney once it hits Wagga Wagga.
Yeah, I was about to say, is that the one that goes through Wagga?
It is, yeah. As a young boy, Ned received basic schooling in the area around Avenel, and began becoming familiar with the bush around him. You know, he's a young guy. He's exploring the bush. He's getting his...
So he's a bush school kid.
He's a bush school kid, yeah. And around the time of his schooling years, he risked his life to save a boy from drowning.
Dope.
In a place called Hughes Creek, yeah. The boy's family awarded Ned a green sash for his bravery, which is also still in existence.
A green sash?
A green sash, yeah. It was dramatized in the 2003 film with Heath Ledger of a principal or a local member of importance of the town awarding him with this sash, or a mayor. But
like, what do you do with a sash?
I don't know.
Do you just wear it? Like,
yeah.
It's the boy with the sash. He remember he saved that kid.
Funnily enough about the sash, we'll get into that. But yeah, he had the sash is important.
Hang on a minute. I see a sash under that armor. Is that Ned Kelly?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not even kidding you.
All
so
right.
the boy's family awarded Ned a green sash, and this was the very sash that was found on his person underneath his famous armor when he was finally captured by the police.
It says something to me that he was wearing. He was still wearing it.
Yeah.
How many years later?
10, possibly even more.
That screams to me of the kid that was like really good at football in high school, and he's just like still telling you about it.
Or a kid that was very proud of his own brand.
Yeah.
Guys, have I told you the story about how that time I tried to save a kid?
Yes, Ned.
Now, of course, there's lots
Let me tell you again.
There's lots of photos of Ned. Well, there's not lots, but there's some photos of Ned and recreations and paintings and things of him throughout his life. And he isn't wearing the sash. So it might have been something that became important to him later in life. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So in 18...
Hey guys, I may have robbed a bank, but at least I got this sash. I'm a good guy.
So in 1865, Red Kelly, I'm just going to call him Kelly's father from now on, or Ned's father, because otherwise it will just...
Yeah, it's going to get confusing.
Yeah, you might as well have me re-record it going...
Papa Kelly.
You might as well have me re-record it and overdub it of me going, Red Ned, to make it more clear.
Yeah, I like the idea of Papa Kelly.
Papa Kelly. Okay, so in 1865, Papa Kelly was convicted in relation to the theft of a calf and was sentenced... Start again, Sean. So in 1865, Papa Kelly was convicted in relation to the theft of a calf and was sentenced to 6 months of hard labor.
Okay.
Yeah, so in all of the information I found, they always talk about sentenced to a certain amount of time of hard labor rather than simply serving it in prison. It's to do with what they're doing.
Yeah, so I guess that's like moving stuff around and building stuff.
They're not just going to take these people that are imprisoned and make them do nothing and sit in a cell. You might as well make them, this is settlers, this is colonial Victoria.
Yeah.
Might as well get them working. So, or he was sentenced to 6 months hard labor or pay a £25 fine. There is no record of payment of transfer of at all of this £25 fine because, they recorded all this sort of stuff. And unfortunately, there's also no mention of Red ever even going to the Kilmore jail in the first place.
Right.
So we
don't know what he did.
We don't know what he did. So it's unknown how this event transpired at all. We just know that he was convicted and arrested. In December of 1866, Papa Kelly was fined for being drunk and disorderly.
So this guy's getting a bit off the rails.
He's getting a little bit off the rails now. And after 2 years of a pretty serious problem with alcohol, he died in Avenel on the 27th of December, 1866.
Well, that's sad.
So a lot's happened in a short space of time already.
It's all kicking off.
Yeah. Now, I've written this incredibly bluntly because there's so much detail about his life. Because historians are obviously very interested in this. So I'm going to read you exactly what I wrote.
Okay.
There was a fire and some stuff.
There was a fire and some other things.
There's a fire and some other things. So essentially, a lot of stuff happened around the home that they had in Avenel, and there was a fire to do with some property. And this, can I just pause for a second? I need to regain my composure.
Too much pud. You've lost where you're up to.
Oh, I've written it too bluntly, and I don't know what it means. I'm sorry. I've written it so straightforward. I'm going to read you exactly what I wrote.
Okay.
Just cut it.
Yeah.
Okay. Begin, cut. There was a fire and some stuff when they moved near some relatives of Ned's mother that nearly ended in his uncle being sentenced to death. Basically, trouble follows him.
That's pretty blunt.
It's a little vague. So essentially, they then, after he died, they moved in with Ned's relatives, or his mother's relatives. So he still had the connection to the Quinn family, who were obviously farmers. That's why they were living on the farm in the first place when they met.
Yep.
So there was an issue and a fire and a whole bunch of stuff, and his uncle was nearly sentenced to death. So this seems like a whole sort of mess that they need to get away from.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a messy family situation.
It's a bit of a messy family situation, whether it's through Edward doesn't have family, through his mother's family, and there always seems to be issues with uncles, and so maybe they need to get away from all this sort of stuff. So the family soon moved to a small farm near 11 Mile Creek. I don't know exactly where 11 Mile Creek was.
Bet you it's 11 miles away from a town.
Mm-hmm. Now, this farm was leased from the government under sort of what they called settlement under the Land Act at the time.
It was that thing where it was like, oh, you can own this if you settle it.
Mm-hmm.
So you go out there and do all the work and then it's yours.
Yeah. So it gave them the option to buy the land once it was cleared and cultivated.
Yeah.
Without, a patriarch to the family, and Ned being the third of 10 and the oldest son. It's not a very effective farming, really.
Yeah.
You haven't got a lot of manpower. So they never really got into the farming of the property
Settlement,
at all.
Yeah.
So they ended up supplementing their income. So Ellen was working sort of in kitchens and seamstering, whatever she could have been doing in town. So they supplemented the income by offering accommodation on the farm to travelers instead.
Okay.
And also selling illegal booze.
Illegal booze?
Illegal booze, specifically illegal booze. Yeah.
Right.
So they couldn't farm the land. It's without that knowledge base, it's just going to be difficult. So why not have people stay at the farm?
Stay at the farm and have a couple of bevies.
Have a couple of bevies, yeah.
A couple of cold ones.
People always want cold.
Couple of 1800s VBs.
Yeah, leave
For a hard-earned thirst.
For a hard-earned thirst. Are you settling the land? Are you near 11 Mile Creek?
Are you terrible at farming?
Are you terrible? Then stop on in for dun 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 dun
dun dun dun dun dun.
Sponsor us, Carlton United Brewing.
Yeah, I'll take a VB sponsorship.
I don't mind VB. If I can't get 4X bitter.
I can't say I've ever drunk one.
Oh, it's good in a stubby.
Funny that during this whole conversation you're wearing a Foster's shirt.
Yeah, look, it was cheap at Cotton On. I really needed a shirt that was this color. So this is sort of the end of the early phase of Ned's life.
Yeah.
He was born, his father had a lot of troubles, and his father died very early.
Yep, so Papa Ned's gone.
Papa Ned's gone. Ned saved a boy from drowning, got given a green sash.
Got his favourite sash.
Got a green sash, yeah. And now they've moved to a small farm that they can use as their property, trying to get their life.
Running an Airbnb.
Running an Airbnb with illegal booze.
Yeah. Putting a couple mints on the pillow.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep, beds and booze.
Turning down the linens.
Mm-hmm.
Making people do all the cleaning before they leave.
Folding up the toilet paper into them little triangles so it looks fancy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as he gets into his teenage years, this is where Ned's rebellious streak somewhat. This is where Ned's becomes who we know him
So
as.
we're getting to teenage Ned.
We're getting into teenage Ned. So at the age of 14.
Angst Ned.
Teenage angst Ned. At the age of 14, in 1869.
Nice.
Yep, I wrote that. Nice. That's in the script. Ned met Irish-born Harry Power.
Harry Power.
Harry Power.
Harry Power.
Harry Power.
Harry Power.
Yeah, Harry, it's not easy to say. It kind of just comes out as Harry Power.
Harry Power.
So remember, Ned is of Irish family. So he's going to have a pretty thick Irish accent. All his family is Irish. And
To be sure.
Yeah, so now he's met that. Yeah, if you watch the movie with Heath Ledger and you've had a few too many beers, impossible to understand.
Turn on them subbies.
Turn on the subtitles. So he met this Irish-born Harry Power. Now, this was actually an alias. His real name was Henry Johnson, and he was a convict who became a bushranger in northeastern Victoria after escaping from Pentridge Prison, which was actually in Melbourne.
Okay.
As with many men that evaded the law in outback Victoria in that era, he had a network of sympathizers that supported him. So this is before really well-established law and governance.
Yeah. It was just kind of town-based.
It's kind of town-based and it's community-based. So he had sympathizers in various locations to help him stay away from the law because he wasn't cleared of anything. He just flat out escaped from prison and just fled to the bush.
Peace out, boys.
Yeah, that's it. I'm out of here. See you on
and the bush
flip.
would have been like 20 meters away from the jail, I'm sure.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But he's gone a long way. He's gone, what would normally be 2 hours, what is 2 hours by car now is now like out. It's a long way.
So that's like 200 Ks.
Yeah, it's a fairly long way. So he had a network of sympathizers that supported him all through the outback. The Kelly family was one of these group of was part of this group of sympathizers. And in May of that year, Ned became his bushranging protege.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
At the end of May, they attempted to steal horses from a local squatter named John Rowe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hang on. So a squatter owns horses.
A squatter is not a person living in a house illegally.
Okay.
Back then, a squatter is someone that lives on the land but is not entitled to own the land.
So a nomad.
Kind of.
Okay.
They're working the land, but they don't own the land.
Right. Okay.
So
they've set up shop.
They're not given settlers' rights.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Yep. I'm with you now.
Mm-hmm. So they attempted to steal horses from this guy, John Rowe, as part of a bigger plan to rob a gold escort. So,
Yep.
Transportation of gold. They abandoned the plan and fled into the bush after John Rowe shot at them.
Nice.
He wasn't just going to roll over and let the horses get pinched.
I'm not taking this.
Yeah. Just
kaboom.
Kaboom. Then 50 minutes to reload.
Yeah. Muskets are my favorite weapon because they're so impractical.
They're so impractical. It was at this time that Ned chose to break off his initial association with Harry Power.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just muskets. I've heard this before, but you can see the musket shot coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're actually not that powerful, so they don't shoot it that fast.
Well, the bullet does come out very fast. The problem is that they're not really shaped or rifled effectively
because it's a ball.
It's a ball.
It's not a rifled.
And
bullet.
if it hits you, it's like there's great videos on YouTube where they shoot it at like big pounds of clay.
Yeah.
And the difference between how a shaped bullet from a rifled barrel versus just a shot would go through, and the exit wound is just absolutely diabolical.
Yeah.
It just blows it apart.
Mm.
So they come out with a fair bit of force. Even old school cannons with their round cannonballs. That's why they were so deadly.
I've seen one musket shot in my life, and it was phenomenal to watch.
I have shot a musket, but it wasn't shooting a ball.
Yeah.
It was set up to shoot buckshot.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was a lot of fun. It's a very different sensation without getting like weird and nerdy about guns.
Yeah.
It was really fun. It was hard because you can't see what you're shooting. As soon as the black powder fizzes, because it's quite a delayed reaction. It's like bang.
Yeah.
Not that delayed for dramatic effect, but it means that the second it puffs, you can't see what you're aiming at. So you better hope you're aiming in the right spot, which for a clay pigeon was difficult. I did ding it. I didn't get a substantial hit. Yeah.
Gave it a wing.
Yeah, just gave it a ding. And that was pretty good. Now, this next tale I've written directly as a quote because there's a bit of funny wording in here.
All right, let's get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Serious? Everyone put your listening ears on. Sean's got something to say.
You've got to try not to laugh, though.
Oh, all right.
Kelly's first brush with the law occurred in mid-October 1869.
Hilarious.
With an altercation between him and a Chinese pig and fowl dealer from Moses Creek named R. Fook.
That's a very nice name.
According to Fook, as he passed... Oh, shit.
I know what I want to say in this situation.
Okay.
Like I think everyone listening knows what is going through my head.
Yes.
I don't think I need to say it.
Okay. I strongly doubt that this was his real name. I have a feeling this could have been a horribly racist nickname that he picked up over the years, but I couldn't find any information that disproved it.
Sure.
I thought it was an excellent story. Anyway, so according to Fook, as he passed the Kelly family home, Ned brandished a long stick and declared himself a bushranger before robbing him of 10 shillings.
He declared himself a bushranger.
Yes. Kelly gave evidence in court that Fook had abused his sister Annie in a dispute over Fook's request for a drink of water. Falk then beat Ned with a stick after he came to his sister's defense, which is hence the motivation for this.
Right.
Annie and 2 family-related witnesses corroborated Ned's story, and the charge was dismissed.
Oh, so it turns out that he was in the right.
Yes.
Oh.
Possibly. The morally right. I don't think declaring yourself a bushranger and brandishing a big stick.
Hello, sir. I would like to tell you that I'm a bushranger.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a moment to talk about bushranging?
It's like the Ace Ventura pet detective thing, but it's like, Ned Kelly, bushranger, as you shake their hand.
Yeah. Also, I'm going to beat you.
Yeah, that too. So a little while later, about a year later, Ned reconciled with Harry Power.
Oh.
Our resident bushranger friend.
That's nice.
In March of 1870. And over the next month, the pair committed a series of armed robberies.
Okay.
I know. Very cool. The local police, well, cool, but
Look, it's, you know what? It's in the past. Cool.
it's in the past. So the local
don't
police.
Go do armed robberies now.
No, don't. Yeah, not with Cheeky Tails.
Cheeky Tail says no.
No, I pulled this from an earlier episode. I quite liked it when you said Cheeky Tails says no thank you to gun violence. And I stick by that. So Cheeky Tails says no thank you to yeah, I think John said it actually.
Cheeky Tail says no thank you.
Cheeky Tails says no thank you to armed robbery.
Oh, yeah.
So the local police had a lot of trouble tracking these 2 down because they're just a pair.
Yeah.
And in particular, they couldn't identify Power's young apprentice.
Yep.
In late April of that year, Ned was identified as the young man working with Power, and a few days later was captured and confined in Beechworth Jail. He was put to trial for 3 charges of robbery.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But in the event of the first 2 charges, the witnesses failed to identify Ned, so they were dismissed.
Right.
And for the 3rd charge, for some insane reason, Ned was not actually shown to the witnesses.
Okay. So just some classic 1800s police work.
Yeah. So the 3rd charge was dealt with by the description provided by the arresting officers and the superintendent. There's a lot of positions within the police force and the jail that kind of the titles are a little gibberish.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people called superintendent.
Yeah.
Constables are clearly policemen, and there's some other roles. So essentially, they dealt with the charge purely by the description given. And so he was sent to Melbourne, where he spent the weekend in lockup before being, I said that really weird. He was sent to Melbourne, where he spent the weekend in lockup before being transferred to Kyneton, it's a difficult word, Kyneton, to face court. However, due to no evidence being provided in court, Ned was released a month later.
Right. A month later. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nice to see that it was working quick then.
So as you can see, he's getting grumpy.
Yeah.
Grumpy boy.
He's getting ticked.
Mm-hmm. He's getting a little ticked. And this is where this recurring theme of police harassment comes from.
Yeah.
He is
a criminal.
He's a criminal, and he's doing shirty
criminal things.
But
yeah.
the way that they're dealing with it is abhorrent.
Yeah. I mean, it's old-timey.
It is old-timey, but you can see that this is where frustration builds.
Yeah.
And it played a major part in his motivations later in his life, less than 10 years later, later in his life. There are a few theories about why no evidence was provided in court and how he got out. One possible theory is that the case of police harassment was in the case of police harassment, which was common in the area at the time. Like, it wasn't provided because it was just the police trying to get him for something, so they just aggravate him and put him in jail. Another is that the Kelly family intimidated the witnesses.
Okay. I could see that.
Yeah. But the main factor that may have had an effect on the witnesses is that Ned was actually described as being both of Indigenous and European descent.
Okay.
So they thought that Power's apprentice was half Indigenous, half European.
Okay.
So when a pale Irish kid with thick black hair appears in court, he's not going to look the same as the descriptions.
Yeah. Okay.
And
I can see that.
This is largely due to the fact that the gang went without washing.
Gross.
Yeah, they're out in the bush. They're filthy.
Yeah. They're covered in dirt.
Yeah. Soot. There's bushfires.
From all those guns.
All the guns and stuff. Yeah. Just kind of being real dirty.
Yeah.
So the description was initially provided that he was of Indigenous descent. And then when they rock up in court, no.
Okay.
Now, Harry Power was eventually caught at a property near the King River, and word spread that Ned had snitched on him.
Oh, not a good thing even to today.
Yeah, it's not correct. It actually turned out to be Ned's uncle, who was paid £500 to assist the police in capturing Harry Power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it did, the word spread through the area that Ned had done it. And he tried quite hard to clear his name.
Yeah.
And I think he made a statement to sort of clear his name.
Yeah, a weirdly big deal.
Yeah.
Even today.
Even today, people
Yeah.
care about their reputation, yeah. So he's had his run-ins with the law now, and he's getting notoriety for effectively being a bushranger, albeit a kid. So he's about 16 at this point.
Okay. Oh, wow. Yes, he's still quite
He's
young.
still quite young, yeah.
That is a little boy.
So we turn our attention forward to 1871. Our boy Ned, told you, had a run-in with the police over a matter of a mistaken horse. Now, this is a huge thing that sort of started off his individual reputation.
Okay.
So Ned had an issue with a mistaken horse identity.
A mistaken horse identity.
Mhm.
Okay. What
And
does that mean?
It got him sent to prison for 3 years.
3 years. Okay, but
3
what does a mistaken horse mean?
So I have distilled this down as best I can because there was a lot of quoting of certain people who just aren't, they're not important to the story.
Okay.
With stories about Ned. So I've distilled
Sure.
this down. So basically a brother-in-law of Ned's
Yeah.
borrowed a horse,
Okay.
borrowed, from the postmaster of the town of Mansfield, right?
Yep.
The thief had not told Ned that the horse was stolen
Okay.
and he was around them and the horse went missing, but the thief then had to move on and do something else. So Ned said that
Okay.
he would try and find it and then hang with the horse essentially until he could return it to what he thought was the rightful owner,
Right.
which was
Okay.
his brother-in-law.
And then it turns out he's got a stolen horse.
Yeah.
Okay.
So eventually the horse was found and Ned took the horse to Wangaratta,
Yeah.
where he stayed with it for a few days, sort of, I assume, trying to get it back to what he thought was its
Yeah.
rightful owner. When Ned was riding back to the town of Greta from Wangaratta, he was intercepted by a constable. Now, this officer thought that the horse might be stolen.
Yeah.
He had an inclination that it might have been
Yeah.
stolen. So he directed Ned to the local police station to sign some papers.
Okay.
As Ned dismounted the mare at the station, the constable tried to grab him by the scruff of the neck, but he failed.
Just missed.
Yeah. So Kelly resisted arrest. The constable drew his revolver and tried to shoot him, but it misfired 3 times.
Wow. So he tried
To shoot him
he
for
tried to
resisting
grab him,
arrest.
missed. Ned goes, "What are you doing?" And then he pulls a gun on him.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I know.
It is no wonder that even though he, like, let's be real, Neddy K was a bit of an asshole. The police did not do anything in this era to not make themselves hated.
No, and they didn't do anything to help themselves even when they had the opportunity to do something right.
Yeah.
They just beat down on people.
Yeah.
So he tried to shoot him and it misfired 3 times.
Yeah.
He was then overpowered by Ned, who later said that he straddled him and dug his spurs into his thighs. This is the constable said of Ned,
Yeah.
that he straddled him and dug spurs into his thighs, causing the constable to roar like a pig. To roar like a big calf attacked by dogs.
Okay.
After subduing Kelly with the assistance of 7 bystanders,
Wow.
Hall pistol whipped him until his head became a mass of raw and bleeding flesh. That's a direct quote of a bystander.
So you tried to shoot him 3 times.
Yep.
He defends himself, and then you pistol whip him.
Yeah, and basically beat him like pretty senseless. Yeah. So Kelly and his friend that were hanging, that he was around, not the thief, but his friend, received 3 years of hard labor, which he served in prisons and also on some ships,
Okay.
like working ships. His good behavior, however, actually helped him get out
Okay.
or get him released early, which
Yeah.
is good. You know, what we're seeing is a moral young man. Like,
Yeah.
he's punished, but
He's still like, okay.
He's still, okay, I'll do the right thing.
Yeah.
To settle the score with the real thief of the horse, however, Ned fought him. You're going to love this.
Fought him.
He fought him
Okay.
in a 20-round bare-knuckle boxing match in a pub in Beechworth,
That is a lot of rounds.
which he won
Okay.
and was declared the district boxing champion.
Okay. So was this other guy the champ?
Nah,
So, okay. All right. They just gave him a title.
it's a vacant title.
Here you go. Wear the belt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There's even a photo.
Oh, is there?
They took a photo of bare-chested Ned with his fists in front of him.
I love this era of photography where
Yeah.
they're like, we will only take photos of important things.
Yeah.
And then you get a glimpse into what they considered was important at the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Only important things, people not smiling because they thought that smiling made them look. Remember reading that article? It goes around all the time on Facebook. It's like articles and it's like got old photos of taken in between what they should
Yeah.
have done. You know, photos of people that wouldn't normally be in the shot, photos of them smiling because they thought that it didn't make the photo look timeless.
Yeah, and it was also like original photos, you had to sit still for so long that you had to have a neutral expression so that you didn't get tired.
Correct.
And move.
Mm-hmm. So there's a great photo of Ned.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty cool. Like,
and I'm picturing one of those old school cameras with like the handheld light.
Yeah, basically,
and
yeah.
It puffs all the smoke.
It almost looks like it's a caricature. Like it's got like a border and
nice.
Yeah, it looks like it's at the circus.
Old timey photos.
Mm-hmm. The thief, his name is Isaiah Wright, then later became a supporter of Ned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
you bested me. 20 rounds of bare knuckle boxing.
He did also do 3 years in prison because of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he became a strong supporter of Ned.
Okay. Good on him.
So some other stuff happened and Ned eventually developed a bit of a gang.
Yep.
Yeah. So this included his brother Dan. Now, the 4 members of his later gang were himself, his brother Dan, Joe Byrne, and a guy named Steve Hart. Now, they were all pretty tight.
Steve doesn't seem like an 1800s name.
No, it doesn't, but it was. So
yeah,
these were the four guys that were in his gang. Throughout this, I'll start referring to them by their last names, except for Ned and Dan. Refer to them as Ned and Dan. And then Joe Byrne would just be Byrne, and then Steve Hart will be Hart, because it's just a little bit easier. Now, with the help of their stepfather at this point, who seemed to be a pretty shady dude as well, this gang stole 11 horses.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Didn't say from who. Now, this led to Ned becoming a wanted man. So because that's that many horses, they know who's doing it. So this actually put a price on his head. And when he was in hiding, a Constable Fitzpatrick was ordered to the town of Greta to relieve the local police who had gone looking for Ned.
Yep. Okay.
Mm-hmm. He read in the paper that there was a warrant out for Dan's arrest as well, so his brother.
Okay.
And thought, yeah, I'm going to go over and pay a visit to the Kelly farm. Maybe he's there. Maybe I'll arrest him.
Yeah. Okay. So
this will be great.
At this stage, he's bounty hunting.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Which he wasn't there to do. He was there to relieve the local police force who were off looking for Ned.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's gone, no, I'm gonna take the glory here.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Now, there are really conflicting stories over what happened at the Kelly farm. Like, I mean, really deeply conflicting stories, because this all eventually went to trial.
And I'm assuming that there is a Kelly version and there is a police version.
Yes, there's a Kelly version and a police version.
Yeah.
So the long and the short of it, Fitzpatrick got shot.
Okay.
He left, and later 2 friends that were on the farm and Ned's mother were arrested and charged with aiding an attempted murder of Fitzpatrick.
Okay.
There's stories about who shot him, when he got shot, how he got shot, why he got shot, but it's all kind of up in the air.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a lot of conjecture.
Yeah.
A lot of the other members that were on the farm got away, but 2 friends and Ned's mother were arrested. Ellen, who is like a sort of not quite middle-aged woman at this stage.
Yeah. But not the kind of person you expect to be getting into scraps with police.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So they went to trial, and the fact that Ned was spotted nearby in the town of Greta that day didn't really help the situation, because it was, Fitzpatrick's account is that he was there and he like stormed in and he shot him and then he ran away and like all this other sort of stuff. And it didn't help that Ned had been spotted in the town. Big deal.
Yeah.
So eventually they were taken to trial. Now, Ned was supposed to be in New South Wales at the time, which is why it's such a big deal that he was spotted in the town.
Right.
The 2 boys, they received 6 years of hard labor, and his mother received 3 years of hard labor, even though she was nursing a newborn.
Wow.
At the time.
And that, again, like, the system is designed to punish everyone for anything harshly.
Now, this was really harsh, even by standards of that day.
Yeah.
For essentially an elderly woman with a newborn. Alfred Wyatt, a police magistrate in Benalla, later told the Royal Commission, which I'll talk about at the end, that I thought the sentence upon that old woman, Mrs. Kelly, was a very severe one.
Yeah, well, it was.
Yeah, it's super unnecessary.
Yeah.
Super unnecessary. Now, this is referred to as the Fitzpatrick incident because it's so up in the air.
Yeah.
After the Fitzpatrick incident, Ned Kelly, Dan Kelly, and Joe Byrne went into hiding, and they were soon joined by Steve Hart, who was a friend of Dan's, thus forming the 4 members of the gang. They were based at Bullock Creek in the Wombat Ranges.
Dope.
I know, that just sounds cool. Well, I mean, wombats are cool enough.
I love wombats.
I know, and even the word wombat brings up romantic
barge-ass boys running around.
It brings up romantic notions of beautiful Australian creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The wombat is like a very peaceful creature.
It is.
Whenever you see it, they're just like slowly walking around.
By its nature, it's defensive, which is cool as well.
So if you don't know how wombats look after themselves, they dig themselves little burrows, and then their ass is like a big bone plate.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very hard and very, very thick. And so they just like stick their ass out of the burrow, and that's the door.
Mm-hmm.
And so the animals just can't get through because
They
there's
just
this
scratch at
giant,
it, yeah.
bony ass.
And that's why it really damages your car if you hit a wombat.
Yes. Yeah, if you hit a wombat, you're in trouble.
You're in trouble, yeah. So they made money in the area by sluicing gold and distilling whiskey. Now, I couldn't find out what that actually meant.
Sluicing.
Yeah, I know. Let's
I'm going to assume it's stealing.
cue the background jazz. Nope, it's a form of prospecting.
Oh, okay. So it was legal.
Yeah, it's just different to panning.
Okay. All right. Well, cool.
Roger.
Carry on.
Cool. So they made money by essentially panning for gold and distilling whiskey, which is pretty cool.
Cool.
And they were supplied with provisions and information by sympathizers that they had around them, including Ned's cousin, Tom Lloyd.
Yeah.
A police party was later dispatched in October of 1878 to hunt the Kellys, and after some searching found themselves really, really close to the Kellys' camp. The downside to them being really close is Ned knew they were there.
Yeah.
He was tracking them. So Ned had found the tracks and was aware of their presence, and after a confrontation with the police, a lot of back and forth shooting and some attempts to flee on horseback. Once again, conjecture about who shot first, whatever. The 3 police officers that had confronted the gang were killed.
Yeah.
And looted of their personal effects and items of value.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting worse.
Yeah, it's getting worse. So accounts differ about
How it happened.
Yeah. It's like, I imagine with the way that the weapons were at that time and being inaccurate, it was a whole lot of dudes standing there being like, I'll shoot you. I'll shoot you. Well, if I shoot first and I miss, then he's going to shoot me. Like, you imagine like if I shoot and miss,
You've got a long time before
you've got a long time
again.
of kind of like running back and forth between trees attempting to reload. So that's why there's a lot of back and forth and the horses and everything, and they all tried.
Yeah.
They just shot at each other. I imagine it's kids with paintball guns at this point.
Yeah, and it would have taken a long time for it all to go down.
Yeah. Like
probably, half an hour.
and you got to think that they would have had to been pretty close. Like in the final showdown that they were firing at 30 yards away from each other, which is really friggin' close.
Yeah.
Like bow and arrow close. Like it's close. Yeah. So Ned would actually reference this incident in a later letter. He wrote 2 letters later on to try and sort of explain his actions. One of them, which we'll talk about, was quite famous. And they would also talk about it after his eventual arrest. So once he was arrested, they went back and talked about all his crimes and things to sort of go through the whole process, so that when they hung him, they're like, we can be sure, you did it.
You done the shooties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, news of the police murders led to widespread fear of the bushrangers.
Yeah,
because it was like it was no longer like, oh, they're stealing some horses, whatever. It's like, they shot 3 policemen.
Killed 3 people now. Yeah.
So on the 28th of October, the government announced a reward of £800 for the gang. So that's 200 per head for their arrest.
It's a lot of money back then.
It's a lot of money back then, yeah. And it was soon increased to £2,000 for the gang.
Sheesh.
Mm-hmm. On the 31st of October 1878, the Victorian Parliament passed the Felons Apprehension Act, and it came into effect on the 1st of November. Basically, it's just really detailing, like without getting into the nerd of it, it's really detailing how they can arrest people, the conditions at how they can deal with these bushrangers. Like if they see them, can they shoot them?
Yeah.
Rather than capturing them.
Rules of engagement, really.
Rules of engagement, really. What happens if there's sympathizers? Like what do we do?
Yeah.
And 3 days later, notices were published throughout the colony, giving the bushrangers until the 12th of November to surrender themselves. So they were trying to get the word out.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is that, these guys are effectively just rustlers and things, but everybody's trying to get them.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to get them. On the 15th of November, the 4 members of the Kelly gang were declared outlaws officially. So outlaws could be killed without challenge by anyone finding them armed or who had a reasonable suspicion that they were armed.
Wow.
Under the Felons Apprehension Act.
What a different time.
Now, the Felons Apprehension Act actually lapsed on the 26th of June, just before the final siege of Ned Kelly. Yeah. So,
okay.
But they were, at that point, they were friggin' Lex Luthor, like trying to take over the world equal to the police.
Yeah.
Yeah. After attempting to flee to New South Wales, which didn't work because the Murray River was flooded at the time, They ended up having to turn around.
Yeah, right.
So the gang headed back into Victoria and made plans to rob the National Bank of Euroa.
All right.
Mm-hmm. So after scouting the town, this is pretty clever.
Yeah.
So after scouting the town of Euroa and generally conducting some pretty good reconnaissance, which is outstanding for the day, it's just 4 stinky dudes on horseback. And finding out that most of the town will be attending a funeral on the 10th of December, the gang began to plan.
Okay.
So on the 9th, the gang held up a substation at Faithful's Creek, which was near the town. They held the employees and the passers-by hostage until after the raid so that they wouldn't alert the town's people, essentially.
Yeah.
One of these passers-by was actually a hawker, like a person that sold things, that provided the gang with nicer clothes for the robbery.
Yeah.
Which is quite funny. I assume that they kind of were coaxed into giving them the nice clothes.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to think that, oh, no, I'll give them these nice clothes. You're going to go rob the bank. You got to look the part, chief.
Yeah. If you're going to be doing a heist, you got to have some heist gear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So while Dan guarded the hostages, Ned, Byrne, and Hart rode out to wreck the telegraph wires to disconnect Euroa from the outside world.
Perfect.
These guys know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And this is their first major bank robbery.
Yeah. I feel like it's a lot easier back in those days too.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like you can just cut 2 lines and that's it.
It's not even 2. And I don't know if you have ever seen what the old telegraph lines look like. Essentially, they were about 7 feet off the ground on poles.
Yeah.
That's it. Not in the ground, not in the trees, not
protected.
Just, you can, if you go to Alice Springs, you can still see the old telegraph wire poles. They're in the desert.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just there.
Right.
And in the towns sometimes as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they went out, they cut these telegraph wires, and on the way back, the 3 men encountered some workers and a hunting party who they took back to Faithful Creek with the other hostages.
Okay.
Just after 4 p.m., the 3 gang members knocked at the doors of the closed National Bank of Euroa and gained entry from the front and the back. They drew their revolvers, held up the bank and the bank's manager's living quarters in the building because he lived in there. They emptied the safes, the cashier's drawers of gold and any money they could find, worth a total of £2,260 and a small number of documents and security, so bonds and maybe some deeds to land and some stuff like that. The 14 members of the bank manager's household and staff were taken back to Faithful's Creek homestead as hostages.
Okay, so now they've got a lot of hostages.
Yeah, they're tying up loose ends.
Yeah.
But at least they're not just killing everybody.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets funny.
Okay.
Back at Faithful's Creek, the gang performed some trick horse riding for the hostages, who now numbered 37, before leaving at 8:30 p.m., warning their captives to remain where they were for 3 hours.
If you move, I won't do that thing where I sit backwards on the horse again. Oh, no.
Everyone be good.
Pretty much. So
if you don't be good, I won't do that thing where the horse turns in a circle when it doesn't, it's just standing still.
Yeah, so you can see they robbed this whole town's bank. They didn't kill anyone.
Yeah, and everyone's like, yeah, do some horse tricks.
Yeah, so they're polite.
Yeah.
To a point. You know,
they are thieving a bank and stealing some nice clothes, but they're not being jerks about it.
They're not being, they could have easily just shot I've played Red Dead Redemption 2. You could easily just shoot.
Sean has played the Ned Kelly simulator.
Ned Kelly simulator, yeah. Maybe I need to restart my Red Dead Online character and just make him Ned Kelly.
Make him just Ned Kelly.
Just make him look like Ned Kelly. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. And the biggest thing you can see from this is how absolutely efficient.
Yeah, they're just getting it done.
That's not bad.
Get her done.
Not bad for 4 dudes from the bush.
Yeah, they're taking 30 hostages. Okay.
Yeah. Not sorry.
With the bus and the bush, you'll be back in town.
All right. So how you going, boy?
Hey?
How you going?
I'm tired, man.
I know.
Unrelated to the story, just in general.
In general, yeah. But you're doing, you seem interested.
I'm enjoying the story.
It's a good story. I really enjoyed reading about this when I researched it. And I found myself chuckling, almost chortling.
It's the Ned Kelly story is one you don't really hear.
No.
Yeah.
You hear snippets of it.
Yeah.
And you see people with tattoos that say such as life and a picture of Ned Kelly's face or a Eureka Stockade flag, which had nothing to do with Ned Kelly.
Absolutely unrelated.
Nothing, absolutely unrelated. Yeah. Ned Kelly never paid $1 of tax in his damn life. Oh dear. So after the robbery, the gang distributed pretty much all the funds to families, sympathizers, family members, poor people.
Yeah.
And the same sort of thing happened when they did a large robbery in the future in the town of Jerilderie. I'm not going to go into that one too deep. I'm going to talk about it a little bit because otherwise it's just another big robbery. And we'll be here till 4 a.m. otherwise.
Okay.
So the gang clearly valued the people. that helped them, and they wanted to support them as much as possible. They believed that the banks were crippling the poor people with loans and deeds to land. So following the Euroa raid, 58 police officers were transferred to northeastern Victoria, making a total of 217 police in the district to essentially prevent further stuff happening with the Kelly gang. As well as that, 50 soldiers were deployed to guard the banks in the region.
Okay, so they made a real impact.
They made a real impact. And the reward for Kelly's capture specifically was increased to £1,000. Just him.
Wow.
Just him.
Okay, that's a lot of money.
£1,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. In 1879, the gang then performed a very complex robbery of the bank in the town of Jerilderie, which involved holding up the police barracks in the town at the same time as conducting the robbery, which only increased their notoriety.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So after the big robbery at Jerilderie, because it involved so much more members of the law, they fled into the bush.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yep. And they weren't spotted for almost a year and a half.
Okay.
By police. It's a pretty long time.
That is a long time. And like they would have had to come in and out of hiding.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty good.
Now, after this, Ned started trying to communicate with people essentially. So he started out with a letter. There was another letter earlier that they talked about a few things, but in particular, the famous one is called the Jerilderie letter. It's actually still in existence, which is pretty cool. And it starts out with, I wish to acquaint you with some of the occurrences of the present, past, and future.
Right.
So this is the opening line of a 56-page letter.
That's too many pages, Neddy.
Yeah, that was written by Joe Byrne, but dictated by Ned. So and this happens a lot, I don't think Ned actually knew how to write.
Man, can you imagine if I said to you, hey, Sean, I would like you to write a letter for me. The first thing you're going to do is say no. Let's say I convince you.
Absolutely.
And then I just talk for 56 pages worth.
Yeah, 56 pages. I'm just going to assume that he wrote it in huge writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Joe Byrne wrote it down.
Yeah.
And this happened a lot in the future as well. I don't think Ned knew how to write.
Yeah.
So, and this was before the robbery in Jerilderie. This is kind of interesting.
Okay.
So he wrote it before they robbed the big town of Jerilderie and then gave it to the local bank accountant during the robbery and insisted that it be given to the local Gazette.
Make sure this gets to the media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Due to the political suppression at the time on news, only small excerpts were printed. Small snippets were printed in the newspaper. But later, in about the 1920s, they rediscovered the entire letter and actually printed the whole letter publicly.
Yeah, at the point where it didn't matter anymore.
40 years.
Yeah.
People still cared about the news.
A lot happened in that 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Two or three monarchs died.
Yeah.
Federation of Australia, World War I.
Yeah.
The Boer War.
A lot happened. Yeah. Nobody's really worrying about the Kelly boys.
According to historians, the letter is both nonsense and also genius.
Okay.
So it's been quoted as being the ramblings of a maniac, but it's also quite remarkable because it really delves into the insights of the motivations of Victoria's most famous bushranger.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. His language is quoted as being hyperbolic, elusive, and full of striking metaphors.
Yep.
In one passage in particular, he calls the Victorian police a parcel of big, ugly, fat-necked, wombat-headed, big-bellied, magpie-legged, narrow-hipped, splore-footed sons of Irish bailiffs or English landlords.
Nice. That is a lot of superlatives.
Mm-hmm. So the letter closes, after 56 pages, with this small passage. Neglect this and abide by the consequences, which shall be worse than the rust in the wheat of Victoria or the drought of a dry season to the grasshoppers in New South Wales. I do not wish to give the order full force without giving timely warning, but I am a widow's son, outlawed, and my orders must be obeyed.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So he's making some demands.
Yeah, he's making some demands. Basically, he's trying to clear certain things, but he says that he talks about the future as well.
Yeah.
And what his plan's going to be. So in response to the Jerilderie raid, the robbing of this huge bank, the New South Wales government and several banks collectively issued £4,000 as prize for the gang's capture. So £4,000 for the gang. So now it's £1,000 per person.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That has risen quickly.
Yeah, dead or alive.
Yeah. Remembering it started at 600.
Started at 600. The largest reward offered in the colony since £5,000 was placed on the heads of the outlawed Clark brothers in 1867. The Victorian government matched the offer for the Kelly gang, bringing the total number now to £8,000. So the New South Wales government and banks offered £4,000.
Yeah.
And then the Victorian government matched it, which now makes it £8,000.
Sheesh.
Biggest reward for bushranging.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is a big reward.
Yeah. Now, over the coming months, more and more police officers, tons, trackers and soldiers were brought in and sort of employed to hunt and capture the gang. They even brought in Queensland, what were they called? They called them Queensland Indigenous, not constables, but essentially like members of the Indigenous tribes of Queensland that were good at tracking. Yeah. And they brought them in law enforcement to try and track them down. Now, this was a pretty smart tactic. Ned actually was very, very concerned.
Yeah.
As he didn't fear, but he admired the skills greatly of the Indigenous trackers. And he was known to fear their skills and knowledge of the bush a little bit. However, they were very underutilized by the commander, and he pretty much didn't utilize them all, and it was his undoing. He never really managed to catch him in a smart way.
Yeah, that feels very on brand as well.
Yeah. So many rumors started to swirl around about the location of the gang.
Yeah.
Where they are, what they're doing, what's going on. Much to do with their locations, but also some exploits as well. And you can imagine that people being desperate for rewards, they would have said anything to try and get even just a little bit of money. Because at that time, you can see they're like, they're paying even small amounts to people for just helping.
Yeah.
Like his uncle earlier, £500.
I heard he's at Fred's house.
Yeah. One of the informants that told the superintendents a lot of information, he actually told them that the gang had fashioned some armor.
Oh, here it comes.
Yeah. Actual foreboding. Do we have a sound bite for foreboding?
No, but we can make one.
We can make one, yeah. Does that cheapen it? Not necessarily.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I'll play with it.
Play with it. So one of these like informants literally told the superintendents that are hunting, and they're like, yo, these dudes have made bulletproof armor out of agricultural like gear.
Yeah.
Like this is a big deal. And you know what they did?
What?
Nothing. They blew it off, thought it was a joke.
Yeah, whatever, mate.
Yeah,
all
whatever.
Right.
You're dreaming.
Get back to that farm.
Get back to that farm. This brings us into the events of Glenrowan, the town of Glenrowan.
All right.
So during the Kelly gang's reign of terror, exploits, the Kelly, during their reign, police watch parties would monitor houses that belonged to the members of the gang's family, or the sympathizers as well. So they used to set up in caves nearby or property near the other properties to try and monitor them. One in particular was the house of Burns' mother near Beechworth. So Joe Burns, member of the gang.
Yeah.
The police used the house of their neighbor, a lifelong friend of Joe Byrne named Aaron Sherritt.
Okay.
Aaron Sherritt. That's 3 sets of double letters in one name. 2 A's, 2 R's, and 2 T's. That's a lot of double letters.
That's too many.
Too many.
Cut some of those out.
Yeah. So Sherritt accepted payments from the police to camp on the property and also for providing information on the gang's activities.
Right.
Now, he most likely fed them false information because he's been friends with Joe Byrne pretty much his whole life.
Yeah.
But we're not really sure. But it's widely regarded that he probably did this to try and protect his friend.
Yeah.
However, in March of 1879, Burns' mother discovered that Sherritt was assisting the police.
Yeah.
So she's been under surveillance from the police, but she wasn't really sure why or how. And then she found out that Sherritt did it. She then told the public that Sherritt was assisting the police, which was, Ned would then send message out to Sherritt over the coming months saying that his supporters wanted him dead and that it would be better if he joined the gang.
Okay.
So he gave him an out. He's like, man, my supporters want you.
Everyone wants you on a platter.
Dead.
So how about you join me?
Yeah, join the gang.
Yeah.
Come hang.
Come hang.
Come hang. Yeah, come rustle
hang
some stuff. Yeah. So he gave him an out and he didn't. So he continued to help the police. Not really sure why. Maybe he was in a stickier situation than we know of.
Yeah. I'm sure that there was some like, hey, if you don't help us, things will get worse for you.
Yeah. So Ned eventually sent word to Aaron Sherritt's mother that the gang were going to kill him.
Yeah. Okay.
They've decided we're going to go kill him.
Yeah.
So they told his mother, we're going to go kill your son, basically.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now, this was deliberately chosen both to get rid of Aaron Sherritt and also to astonish the colonies and the whole world.
So to make a point.
Make a point, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So in June 1880, Dan Kelly and Joe Byrne kidnapped Sherritt's neighbor and forced him to come with them to Aaron Sherritt's house.
Okay.
Sherritt was inside with his family, but also 4 policemen that were there to conduct reconnaissance and also protect Sherritt. They're in the back room and his family's in there. At 6:30 p.m. on the 26th of June, Dan went to the front door and Joe Byrne, with the neighbor in tow, went to the back door and knocked and called out for Sherritt to come outside. When he answered, Burns shot him in the throat
Oh,
and then in the chest.
jeez.
Dead.
Yep.
They then entered the hut and they let Dan in through the front door. So
Right.
now the Kelly gang is inside, 2 of them.
Yeah.
And a neighbor.
Yeah.
Sherritt's family's there, probably pretty scared, pretty upset, and the policemen are in the back room. So the police are like, like
these
scrambling,
guns.
trying
Yeah.
to get their guns ready to try and fight back. Not really great.
Yeah. Totally unprepared for what was coming.
So the boys are in there now, and they're trying to get the policemen to come out of the room. They're like, "Come on, like
Yeah.
we're armed.
Come
We've
on,
got you."
guys.
The police decided not to leave.
Yeah.
So they asked Sherritt's wife to go in to the room to convince them to come
jeez.
out. So they kept Sherritt's wife.
Yeah.
So they sent the wife in to try and be like, "Come on, you've got to come out. Like these guys mean
Yeah.
business." And they're like, "No, now we've got to." So they didn't really like that. So the gang went outside and tried to burn the house down.
Oh, jeez. That is a nuclear option.
Yeah. So they've obviously, they run out of ideas. They've just killed this dude. It's a whole
Yeah.
thing. And they're like, "You know what? Fine." So they went outside, tried to burn the house down.
Burn the house
Burn
down
the house
to
down.
flush them out.
Yeah, flush them out. They'd failed.
What?
They failed to burn the house down.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I thought
So
you were
they-
gonna tell me some awful thing there.
So they
Okay.
rode away. Now, this whole sort of siege went for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
So a lot of tension.
Yeah.
The police were so scared to leave the house that they didn't leave till tomorrow morning.
Oh, wow.
They were
Okay.
that
They
scared.
thought they'd be waiting for them.
Yeah, so this is
Yeah.
8:30 at night. They finished the siege. So
Yeah.
they started at 6:30, finished at 8:30, and they didn't leave. They were too terrified that the gang, all of 2 of them, would be out there waiting for them.
Probably smart.
Mhm.
Yeah. You also have to think, like, how much of this is just the mystique at this point?
Yeah.
Like, are they actually this good?
Are they
Or is
good
it
at what they
just-
do, or are they just
Yeah.
clever?
Is it just that people are like, everyone's like, oh, these Kelly boys, they're going to get you.
Yeah.
And then the Kelly boys rock up. You're like, oh, I pooped my pants. Oh, I pooped my pants.
Poop my pants.
I pooped them.
Pooped them. Yeah, it's. I think that I honestly think that it is mystique. So
Yeah.
much of it has
It
to be.
has to be, right?
It has to be. It has to be mystique.
Like, they haven't
this-
actually killed that many people that haven't attacked them as
yeah,
well.
These guys are in their early 20s.
Yeah.
Dan is younger than Ned. He's 22 or something like
Yeah.
that. Like
So they're
he's-
young boys.
they're young.
Well, they're
they
not really
don't
young
know-
boys, but-
I didn't know diddly when I was that
Nah.
age. You know, like these.
No, I wasn't doing anything worthwhile.
Yeah.
Cheesy's going to love that yawn. But
Yeah.
he
So
complains about them.
he complains about them.
Yeah, he doesn't like the yawns.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not editing that out at all.
Nah, keep it in. So knowing that the word of the murder, or I'm going to use muck duck because I always liked that gag
Muck
from The
duck.
Office. It's called murder, not muck duck. Anyway, so knowing that the word of the muck duck would reach the law soon and a special train of police would inevitably be sent north, they established a plan to intercept it and wreck it.
Yeah.
So
Now
they've killed Sherritt. They know that their stuff's going to happen.
Yeah.
It took a while because it took the police a whole night to get out. So they met back up and they were like, we're going to have to intercept this train and deal with it. So they planned on using a town along the train route north to try and wreck this police
Yeah.
business from getting it more out of hand. They selected the town of Glenrowan to use for the siege. So it was strategically at a certain point in the track and there was a ravine with a kink in it that they were going to set up on as the thing. And then they were going to rob the bank in Benalla and then return to the bush for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Okay.
So they have a plan. They're clever. They're planning what they're doing.
Yeah,
they're not just
doing it for
wildly
fun.
riding
Yeah.
around. Yeah.
Yeah. They're not just doing it out of spite.
Yeah.
They're planning.
They're planning. So after a failed attempt to damage the track in Glenrowan, after they found out where they wanted to do it, Ned and Hart, so Steve Hart, would actually employ a local plate layer and laborers to finish off the job in destroying it. They selected a sharp corner over a ravine for the spot that would send the train and its occupants to hell, as Ned would say.
Jeez.
So they got a plan. They couldn't destroy the track themselves, so they got some plate layers and laborers.
Yeah.
With the gang now assembled in Glenrowan, so Joe Byrne and Dan are now back from dealing with Sherritt.
Yeah.
Ned and Hart, they're all together. They're all in Glenrowan.
Yeah.
They proceeded to take over the station master's house, the railway station, the Glenrowan Inn, which is opposite the station.
Yeah.
All of this is about a mile out of town,
Yeah.
or just about 2 kilometres. The gang used the Glenrowan Inn to hold the male captives so that they wouldn't foil their plan. And they'd kept the females and the children hostage in the station master's house, so they're a bit more comfortable rather than in the dirty old pub. The other hotel in town was actually used to stable the horses, which were set up with explosives and carrying their armor. Hey, Ollie.
See ya.
Look at his belly.
Yeah. He's got a big belly.
He's got a big belly. That's too much pud.
Too much.
Too much pud. So they had their armor. They had their explosives to damage the track and do whatever else they needed to do. They've dealt with the town.
Yeah.
Well, a big chunk of the town. They're ready.
Yeah.
The plan is going to come into fruition. Mm-hmm. So these horses had all the stuff ready to go.
Yeah.
The armor was designed to protect them specifically as they fired down on the crashed train while they dealt with survivors. So it covered their face, covered their chest, partly covered their arms, but not their legs.
Yeah.
So that they could still ski, daddle, and possibly get on a horse. Although the armor was about 44 kilos.
So much
Getting
weight.
on a horse is hard enough as it is, and they had limited mobility and visibility. So I don't know if they would have been able to get on the horses per se.
Yeah.
But the plan was to be able to ski daddle. So by Sunday afternoon, the train had not arrived. They'd been in the town now for a while, and the train hadn't arrived yet. And most of the hostages that were there in the station master's house were then moved into the inn. So they brought the women and the children to the Glenrowan Inn.
Yeah.
There were now 62 hostages total, including sympathizers who the gang planted to keep control.
Yep.
Well, guys, we should do what they say.
Hey, it's not that bad. Like, this is going to be pretty...
You notice they haven't killed any of us?
Yeah, they... Actually, yeah, so it's a pretty smart plan, really.
Yeah.
Keep some sympathizers in there.
That's really funny. I like that.
So as time passed, the gang filled the hostages with booze
Nice.
and organized music to keep them entertained, as well as dancing and games and kind of just having a bit of fun.
So
while
no
they
horse
waited.
tricks this time.
No horse tricks this time. The horses have got, they got shit to do. I mean,
Horses
stuff
are
to
busy.
do. Horses are busy doing horse shit.
I'm just out here being a horse.
One hostage later testified that Ned did not treat us badly, not at all.
Yeah.
However, he also apparently threatened to shoot a teenage boy over something small and scared the crap out of the teenage boy, and he was terrified for the whole experience.
Yeah.
I would be terrified in all of this.
Yeah. I mean, they're not good guys.
No, they're famous, but they're not necessarily good. So during the late afternoon on Sunday, Ned allowed 21 hostages that he thought he could trust to leave.
Okay. That seems like a misstep.
Yes. At 10 p.m., Ned and Joe Byrne captured the only policeman in Glenrowan with the help of the local schoolmaster who sought to gain the trust of the gang in order to foil their plans.
Okay.
Yeah, so the local schoolmaster was like, I'm smart. I'm going to help him.
Yeah. I'm going to get on the good side.
I'm going to
take
screw
him
this
down.
up. Yeah. Believing that the schoolmaster was their ally, they allowed him and his wife to return home and go quietly to bed and not to dream too loud. The police train that they were expecting didn't leave Benalla until 2 a.m. of Monday morning.
Right.
But there was a twist.
Yeah.
They had a pilot train.
So they had a train ready to go.
They had a train in front, like a pilot vehicle on the
so
highway.
the idea was it would take any damage.
It would take any damage, yeah. So they kind of knew that something could possibly go wrong. It's pretty straightforward. We're sending a train up north. What can they do to the train? They're probably going to blow it up. So let's send a pilot train. So they sent a pilot train in the lead as they suspected that the tracks would be sabotaged somewhere along the way. The police train, the main one, carried 7 regular police troopers under the command of Superintendent Hare, 5 Queensland Indigenous troopers under the Sub-Inspector O'Connor, and 4 journalists and several civilians.
Okay. Yeah, that's smart. Bring along civilians and journalists.
At 2:30 a.m., the pilot train reached the town of Glenrowan, and the schoolmaster stopped the train to alert the driver of the danger ahead. So he stopped the pilot train.
Yeah.
Ned had decided to let the hostages return home at this point, and at the time he was delivering them a lecture about police informers when Joe Byrne came in from outside with news that the train had arrived.
Yeah.
The gang donned their famous armor and then prepped for a confrontation.
Yeah. So here we go.
Here we go. He's found out that the pilot train came into town and the schoolmaster screwed them over.
Yeah.
And the train is here because it's only just behind it.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, cool.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. So the hostages then started to escape. Oh, a hostage then escaped to the train station and started alerting the police.
Yeah.
He got out. On hearing the news from the hostage, Superintendent Hare led a detachment of police specifically to the inn while the rest prepared horses and gear.
Yeah.
This was just after 3 a.m.
God, so tired.
I know. I'm sorry. I know it's late.
I meant them.
Oh, yeah. Sleepy.
Yeah. 3 a.m. That's the worst time to be awake.
Yeah, and they've been drinking and dancing
Yeah.
and shit for days.
Not good.
So the gang positioned themselves in the shadows on the veranda of the inn. It's a pretty old style inn. So they positioned themselves in the shadows on the veranda as they waited for the police to approach. And then as they got closer and closer, they opened fire at about 30 yards. The police then returned fire, and it was approximated that 100 to 150 shots were fired in 15 minutes.
That is a lot of shots
Between
for that day
like
and age.
4 or possibly 5 policemen and 4 gang members.
Yeah.
That's a buttload.
That is a lot.
That's a lot. Someone then shouted out that there were hostages inside, and a lull in the gunfire occurred.
Yeah.
Superintendent Hare, he was wounded in the wrist, and Ned himself was shot in the left hand, the arm, and the foot, his right foot.
Yeah.
Joe Byrne was shot in the leg and retreated inside the hotel. 2 hostages were fatally wounded in this fire, with a third that was possibly shot earlier. They're not really sure how he died. So 2 hostages fatally wounded, plus a third one, because the bullets are just flying.
Yeah.
And they're ripping through the thin ass weatherboards of this pub. Yeah. So during the lull, a number of hostages, mostly the women and the children, escaped, which is good. Ned, who is now bleeding pretty heavily from his severe wounds, retreated behind the hotel and then made his way into the bush.
Yep.
And he waited. They found his skull cap and his rifle about 100 yards from the hotel early in the next morning once the sun had come up. He would later say that he was in the bushes very close to the police the whole time, waiting for the right moment. Yeah. The police then proceeded to surround the hotel while the firing sort of continued sporadically. So 30 yards is really damn close, but they've got like inaccurate pistols. The police are dealing with guys standing there wearing big ass armor.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of judo going on. There's not a lot of training in the police to just rush in and actually take him down. This is old timey.
Yeah.
So very Wild West. Throughout the hours of the morning, this sort of went on and on and on. They surrounded it. They surrounded the pub. They fired at them. The guys fired from inside. They're still trying to assess what's going on with hostages and stuff like that. Now, at about 5 a.m., Joe Byrne was fatally shot.
Yep. So he's down.
He's down. Joe Byrne was fatally shot in the groin whilst making a toast to the gang. So he was at the bar inside the hotel and he was making a toast to the gang.
Yep.
Probably a farewell toast, and he got shot through the wall or through a window in the groin, and he bled out and died. So between 5:30 and 7 a.m., more police then arrived, bolstering this force. And this is getting big. From Wangaratta and Benalla, surging the police force up to now like up to 40, close to 40 people.
There's 10 for everyone.
Yes, 10 for everyone. Yeah.
Well, more now because one of them's dead.
Bleeding really bad from his wounds. Ned lay in the bushes for most of the dark hours.
Yeah.
At dawn, Ned, dressed in his armor and armed with 3 handguns, came out of the mist and fired at the police from the rear as they surrounded the hotel. Yeah. They didn't know Ned was in the bushes. They thought he was still inside.
There,
So he just came out. Now there's this great quote from journalist Tom Carrington. And he wrote, "With the steam rising from the ground, it looked for all the world like the ghost of Hamlet's father with no head, only a very long neck."
Wow.
This is the helmet. It was the most extraordinary sight I've ever seen or read of in my life, and I felt fairly spellbound with wonder, and I could not stir or speak.
Yeah. He used to write so much better back then.
I know. It was so much more impressive.
Yeah.
So the police returned fire on Kelly, naturally.
Yeah.
And as he staggered towards the hotel to try and fight back. He's feeling pretty invincible. Big, thick bullets. Big, thick armor. The weight of his armor and already bleeding from his wounds and the impact of the bullets on the steel made it really, really difficult for him to fire and reload and move all at the same time.
Yeah.
He later described the impact of the bullets on his armor like blows from a man's fist.
Yeah, well, it would be.
Yeah, it would hurt.
Yeah.
Like it would knock you around. The gunfight lasted under half an hour against Kelly, which is still astonishing. Like they're pretty close. Like you'd think it'd last longer, but yeah. With the remaining members of the gang providing intermittent covering fire from inside the pub. Ned was eventually brought down as they sort of chased him away next to a big downed tree, later called the Kelly tree.
Yeah.
After 2 shotgun blasts to his legs. So the information online was different to what I know from actually going to the town of Glenrowan. I've actually been there and seen the tree. It is sadly not there anymore. I'll get into this at the end, but he was shot in the legs with a shotgun and eventually staggered away and collapsed leaning against this tree.
Yeah.
And they went and found him. He was lying there just defeated. He was then carried to the station where the doctor tended to his wounds. He was found to have more than 28 wounds on his body, with serious gunshot wounds to the left elbow, the right foot, his wrist, and more less serious wounds throughout his whole body, including cuts and abrasions from the armor and it all just adding up. This man is battered.
Yeah.
At 10 a.m., a ceasefire was called and the remaining hostages left the hotel. 2 were arrested for being known sympathizers at this point. So now the only people left inside
are the Kelly boys.
The Kelly boys, the Kelly gang. Joe Byrne, Dan and Steve Hart.
Dead.
Yep.
So Steve Hart and Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
By Monday afternoon, a crowd of around 600 people had gathered at Glenrowan, and Dan and Hart had sort of ceased shooting from inside. At 2:50 p.m., the police set fire to the Glenrowan Inn to burn the remaining men out from inside. A Catholic priest then entered the building to try and rescue anyone that was left inside. All he discovered was the body of Joe Byrne, Hart, and Dan Kelly. No one was prepared to come out. The exact circumstances of the deaths of Dan and Hart aren't actually known. We know about Joe Byrne's death, but what actually killed Dan and Steve Hart, not sure. Did they shoot themselves? Were they wounded? Did they die from the fire?
Yeah.
And the priest managed to get Joe Byrne's body out.
Right.
After the fire had died out at about 4 p.m., the police then moved in and recovered the rest of the bodies from inside the hotel.
Yeah.
The following day, the police tied Joe Byrne's body to the door of the Benalla lockup to be photographed.
Okay.
Essentially to identify it, yeah. His friends asked for the body, but the police instead arranged for a hasty inquiry and a burial in a pauper's grave in the Benalla Cemetery.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The charred remains of Dan and Steve Hart were taken to Greta and buried by their families in unmarked graves in the local cemetery.
Yeah. I guess you don't want it to become a shrine, do you?
No. And it needs to be with respect.
Yeah.
This is the last stand.
Yeah.
So they want to show some respect to the family and bury them. So now we get into the ending of Ned.
Okay.
Ned survived to stand trial. So he survived. We know this much. So he stood trial on the 19th of October, 1880. Sir Redmond Barry, the same judge that had sentenced his mother for 3 years of hard labor, was essentially the judge.
Yeah.
After many days of trials and recesses, mostly due to which murders he could be charged for, which ones he couldn't be, due to inconsistent evidence and witnesses and everything, he was eventually sentenced to death by hanging.
Yeah.
As Barry handed down the conviction, he finished with the customary line of, "May God have mercy on your soul."
Yeah.
Ned then replied.
What did he say?
He said, "I will go a little further than that, and I say I will see you there where I go."
Oh.
Barry died of natural causes 12 days after Ned Kelly's execution.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Guess he did see him there. The Kelly curse. The Kelly curse.
Hashtag Kelly curse. Start a conspiracy
for
something that happened 142 years ago. Bring it back.
And set. Kelly curse.
In the weeks leading up to his execution, thousands turned out to the streets of Melbourne in rallies and protests and all sorts of things. Eventually, at one point, they got a petition with 32,000.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
It's a lot of signatures.
Then. Yeah.
And it was handed with the hopes of clemency, which they're nothing.
No.
They were like, no, too bad.
Yeah, this guy's going.
Yeah. The day before he was hanged, the famous photo of him was taken, which is the one you see of his beard.
Yeah.
And he's sort of just looking listfully away from the camera.
Yeah.
It's funny because he looks content. Actually, in the photo,
he
looks fine.
Yeah.
It was taken of him as a keepsake for his family.
Right.
And he was granted time to farewell his relatives and his friends. And then, as we know, he was hung at 10 a.m. on the 11th of November, 1880.
Yep. And that was that.
That was that. Well, so in March 1881, so the next year, a royal commission into the conduct of the Victorian police force during the Kelly gang's run was brought in. And although nothing could exonerate Ned or his gang from the crimes that they committed, it did turn out to have multiple recommendations for future conduct, and numerous officers and senior staff were stood down.
Yeah, good.
So Ned's effective last wish to have something be dealt with about the brutality of the police at the time came true.
Yeah, and I mean, it's sad that, like, you could argue that this all happened because of the way that they acted.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could just say, like, he was a bushranger. It was going to happen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that something like that has to happen for change to occur.
Absolutely.
And, like, you still see that today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, things don't change until something goes wrong. Doesn't matter how much you point it out.
Mm-hmm. In line with practices of the time, there's no records kept regarding the disposal of an executed person's remains. They just kind of chuck them in the ground. So apparently he was buried in the old men's yard just outside the walls of the old Melbourne jail.
Yeah, that would make sense.
A few things happened like over the next, 10 plus years. I'll skimp over them briefly.
Yeah.
Basically, a newspaper reported that Kelly's body was dissected by medical students who removed his head and his organs to study. Yeah, dissection outside of coronial inquiry was actually illegal at the time. So public outcry at the rumour raised real fears of public disorder, leading to the commissioner of the police force to write a letter to the jail's governor, who denied that the dissection had taken place.
Yeah.
However, saw cuts that are located on a piece of his occipital bone recovered in 2011 confirmed that they had dissected him.
Oh, so that was true.
Yeah, it was true.
That kind of stuff was probably going on all the time. Because they would do that with the executed people a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, actually.
They took a death mask of him.
Yep.
Where they took a mold of his face. It's quite haunting.
Mm.
And it's still kicking around. At one point, there was a grave robbery issue.
Okay.
And there was some stuff to do with maybe it was his grave. So in 1929, the Melbourne jail was closed for a routine demolition, and the bodies in the graveyard were uncovered.
Closed for just a routine demolition.
Yeah. So the bodies in the graveyard were uncovered during the demolition works. During the recovery of the bodies, spectators and workers stole skeletal parts, skulls, and things from a number of graves. One marked with the initials EK.
Edward Kelly.
Yeah. Now, I'm not going to go into it, but too deep. But essentially, it went on like that for until like the 1970s.
Yeah.
Of the like, did they steal something? What did they steal? They thought it was Ned's body. Then they found out later it wasn't Ned's body. It was some other dude that had similar initials. Eventually, some dude took the skull thinking it was Ned's. Then later, they returned it.
Yeah.
Like decades later, the family returned it. But eventually, they found a bunch of information, and it all came back in the end.
Yeah.
So in 1972, the skull was put on display at the old Melbourne jail until it was stolen in 1978.
Right.
Yeah. An investigation in 2010 proved that the displayed skull was in fact the one recovered originally in 1929 from the prison.
Yeah.
They've since then gone over a whole heap of forensic stuff to try and work out if any of this to do with the stealing of the skull, the skeletons, was actually Ned's.
Yeah, right.
And they found that a different one was, and what they actually thought was Ned's was not.
Okay.
So after all of this skeletal stuff and all of this crazy stuff, they'd matched certain DNA strands through the genetic line of his mother to find out who was what. And eventually the Victorian government issued a license for Kelly's bones to be returned to the Kelly family.
Okay. That's
in 2012.
That's a long, long time afterwards.
Yep. And they made plans for his final burial. The family also appealed for the person who possessed Kelly's skull to return it, because at this point it was still kind of missing.
Yeah.
On the 20th of January 2013, Kelly's relatives granted his final wish and buried his remains in a consecrated grave, or in a consecrated ground in Greta, at the cemetery near his mother's unmarked grave. A piece of Kelly's skull was also buried with the remains and was surrounded by concrete to prevent further issues of looting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There you go.
Yeah. So that's the story of Ned Kelly.
That is Neddy K.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Our boy Ned. Old boy Ned.
Yeah, I feel strange about the story of Ned Kelly because it's like either way. You could go either way with it. You know, like he was a hero. He stood up for people's rights. Also, very much not a hero. Mm-hmm. Bit of a dick. And you can't separate those two. You know, they are together, you know? And so it's an odd story. And I find it very strange that is one of the things that Australia has, Australian culture has decided to define itself on.
They've clung to it.
Yeah.
So I asked my dad about this once. Well, we've talked about it because he was with me in Glenrowan the first time. He said that the actual town of Glenrowan up until the 90s hated it.
Yeah.
Hated the story.
Yeah.
And didn't want anything to do with it. Like you'd mention it in the pub and everyone would tell you to shut up and leave.
Mm.
And then eventually they just kind of accepted that it was a massive integral part of the Kelly tourism.
Yeah. Probably, I'm going to assume that maybe some industry closed nearby and all of a sudden it was like, oh crap, we need this story.
Yep. And a bit more of the internet.
Yeah.
But there's been some like really cool things that it sort of generated as part of Australian culture. Like, you know, you see a dude with a big beard. People still call it a Ned Kelly beard.
Yeah, and then of course you've got Ned's whiskey.
Mm-hmm. There was this really famous...
I thought I'd get more of a reaction about that from you.
I don't want to talk about the Ned's whiskey. There's this really famous set of paintings.
Yeah.
Actually, who was it by? Quick check. Sidney Nolan.
Okay.
He did a series of paintings that it's considered the greatest sequence of Australian painting of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And it was like, I've seen some of them in the National Portrait Gallery in Canberra. They're quite striking. The stylized depiction of Kelly's helmet has become quite iconic, and hundreds of performers dressed in the Nolan-esque Kellys in the opening ceremony of the 2000 Olympics.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to remember. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't remember much of that. But like, that's kind of strange. Like, hey, welcome to the Olympics. He's a criminal.
They've made multiple movies about him.
Yeah.
Mick Jagger even played him.
Yeah, there you go.
Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones played Ned Kelly in a movie in 1970.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. It's just insane. It just became such a massive part of Australian culture.
Well, great story, Sean. Good tale.
It is. I'm sorry it's so late at night.
That's not a problem.
But to the listeners, it's a Wednesday morning.
To the listeners, they've got no idea.
They've got no idea.
And we release on Tuesdays, but thank you for remembering that.
Yeah, but they're going to listen to it. Oh, damn. Cut it.
Not a chance.
Cut it.
If Adam can call us the Cheeky Boys podcast.
Oh, he did too. I remember that.
And then refer to it as viewers, even though we're an
that.
audio podcast.
Well, do we need a slang term for Cheeky Tales listeners?
Nah.
Are the listeners cheeky boys?
No. Cheeky Boys, I feel like that's a very specific term to the four of us that have done tales.
So we are the cheeky boys.
Yeah.
And they are our
Chiquitos.
Our chiquitos.
I'll have some taquitos. I'll have some taquitos. No, I do like the idea of getting a name for people who listen. I'll continue thinking about that. Well, thank you very much, Sean, for filling in for the ill John.
You are welcome.
Again, I hope that you get well soon, John.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot wait for you to come back for your tale that you are so excited to tell me for next fortnight. Anyway, so thank you for filling in.
More than welcome.
Glad to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
That is all right.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, if you would like to see some images relating to Neddy K, please jump on the social medias at Cheeky Tales Pod. You will find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We put up some supplemental images there that will help you get a better idea of what we're talking about. And it's also great for you to be able to add a comment and just have a chat about what you've heard and maybe get involved. Have a go at telling us what you think about Ned Kelly. Hashtag good guy. Hashtag not good guy. Get those two amazing hashtags going.
Hashtag such is life.
Hashtag such as. Thank you very much for listening.
Mm-hmm.
We hope to see you next fortnight. And maybe you'll be here, Sean. Maybe we'll need you to fill in again.
I think all the cheeksters would like to have me nearby.
The cheeksters.
Yeah.
Anyway, get well soon, John.
Mm-hmm.
We will speak to you all next fortnight. Good night.
I knew you were going to say good night. I knew you were going to say good night.